achieved.
Hello? Is anyone out there? I don't blame you if you are not. I am coming off a deplorable 2-10 performance at UFC Fight Night 65. Let that sink in for a moment. 2-10. Of the 12 fights, I got 2 right, and one of them was the main event. So that means leading up to the main event, I had gone 1-11, and it was an absolutely horrid night. As I said to one of my, somebody who had contacted me via email, I feared for the life of Stipe Miocic going into the main event because I knew how much everyone else I'd picked bit the big one that evening. I don't think I could have picked, if someone said to me, pick all losers tonight, I couldn't have done that well. I couldn't have picked that 10 losers had I wanted to. Either way, it was horrible. And there were fights on the card, for example, Kaylin Curran, who the fight played out pretty much as I expected to, and she got caught at the end. I thought Jonathan Webb won that matchup. I thought Hatsuyoki did exactly as expected until he got caught at the end of the second round, and that cost me as well. But for the most part, it was just a bad overall performance on my part, and they happen, and that's the thing. A lot of people get upset about these things. Don't get upset. It's gambling. It's predictions. It's not fortune-telling, folks. Was I pissed? Yes. Were you pissed? Absolutely. Do we get to move on? We do. Yes, we lost money. That's what gambling is. It's not a sure thing. It's not me here. This is who's going to win, and they're going to win. Nobody would be on the other end of that. That would be idiocy if that was the case. I was hoping to do a whole vent or bitch about the Reebok deal, but unfortunately I had to address my paltry performance, and I'm hoping to turn it around at UFC Fight Night 66, which is coming up next. It'll feature 6 main card fights. It's actually taking place in the morning, at least where I live, so check your clock to see what time this fight is going down for you based on what part of the world you live in. It should be pretty... I'm pretty impressed with the lineup. It's a pretty solid lineup, especially the final 4 fights in the main card. I'll give you my 6 main card predictions on this episode of the show, and all my preliminary picks, and I can't stress this enough because people are still asking. All of my preliminary picks are available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, written down, broken down as full as I possibly can, and given predictions. I still have people asking, why aren't you talking about the prelims? Why aren't you talking about this fight? Why aren't you talking about that fight? Because they're not on the main card. This is the main card. Just the main card. That's all I give predictions for in the video. Preliminary picks, kamikazeoverdrive.net. Check that out. Let's get to the first prediction. Alright, before we actually get into our first main card prediction, I want you to listen. There's going to be 2 sounds, very important. The first one is this. That's the sound of me tearing up my fight prediction, because honestly, at this point in time, it just hasn't been going my way. The second sound you're going to hear is this. That's a coin being tossed at the end of my breakdown, as that's going to decide who I pick. So let's go, okay? We're going to kick things off in the UFC's featherweight division as Mark Eddiva, 6-1-0, takes on the debuting Levan. Again, I'm probably butchering this. Makashvili. It comes with a record of potentially 6-1, potentially 9-1, depending on what source you are using. I'll address that momentarily. As I said, this is the debut for Makashvili. His first fight actually was canceled. He's only had 5 months off since his last professional performance, though. He's actually late injury replacement for Alex White, and he's taking this fight on approximately 3 weeks' notice. For Eddiva, this is his 3rd fight in the UFC. He's coming off a bit of a longer break, 11 months on the shelf. He is fighting at home for the first time. This is the UFC's first trip to the Philippines, so he's fighting at home, which will be fantastic. The crowd's going to be hot because it's the opening fight of the main card, so that will certainly be something favoring Eddiva. Minimal experience on both sides. As I said, depending on what source you're using, Eddiva 7 pro bouts, Makashvili potentially 10. There's some unrecorded bouts are going at home. The UFC obviously going the bigger number to pump up his record. Eddiva does have a couple UFC fights and his debut under his belt, so the experience factor could favor him in that mindset. Makashvili, talent-wise, he has a strong wrestling background. He's a decent technical striker in the footage I have seen of him and the reports I have read. 3 wins by knockout, 3 wins by decision. His only loss, he's avenged, and he won the CFFC featherweight title. It's very late where I am right now, so I'm doing my best to break this down for you without waking my wife and children up. For Eddiva, he's a wushu competitor. He represented the Philippines in multiple international competitions and medaled. He did quite well in those competitions. MMA-wise, 2 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission, and a decision win. He pulled off an upset in his debut. He is coming off his first career loss. It happened versus Kevin Susan. One heck of a fight. If you get a chance, make sure you check it out. And it was a second-round knockout in that fight. He's a very solid striker. As I said, he did get drawn into a pretty entertaining but technically lacking brawl in his debut, and for the most part he struggled with the power and reach of his opponent in that match. A very lengthy fighter in Souza, and that really gave him some issues. Statistically, Eddiva's averaged 4.14 strikes landed per minute through those 2 fights. He's given up just over 3.5, so he's kind of a take one to give one type of guy. But, when he stays technical, he's a far more effective fighter. For Makashvili, he does tend to let his offense drift at times, and that's partly the reason he lost his one fight. His opponent was able to outwork him because he simply stayed out at range and didn't do enough to show the fighters, show the judges that he was, being the better fighter. I think Eddiva will capitalize on this. I think that's a massive advantage for him. I really like that aspect, his aggression and mixed with Makashvili's tendencies to stay back. If Makashvili tends to go with wrestling and he can take Eddiva down, that's a big advantage for him. And also, there's a lot of wild cards there, as I said. Makashvili's making his debut, he's doing it in MMA territory, and he's doing it on reasonably short notice. All tough things to overcome. For Eddiva, a little bit of a longer layoff. He's coming off the first loss. We don't know how he reacts. A lot of guys do react better than normal. Overall, here we go. I'm kidding. I already know who I'm going to go with. I'm not going to flip a coin, even though you heard me flip the coin. I will take the fighter who's fighting at home with the UFC experience against the guy in short notice. It's probably going to be a bit of an upset. Only the odds are out for this one. So there's the first upset for those of you talk about me being a cherry picker. There's my first upset pick, Mark Eddiva to defeat Levan Makashvili. I'll take Eddiva by knockout. Fight number 2 is in the UFC's featherweight division as well, and the prodigal son has returned as Philippe Nover, 6-3-1, returns to the UFC after his earlier stint, taking on I'm probably going to butcher this, Chul Nam, the Korean bulldozer. That's a heck of a name. I love that. 18-4-1. Now, Nover is making his return to the UFC after his first run ended back in 2010. He lost in the Ultimate Fighter 8 finals against Efrain Escudero. A lot of hype. He was compared to George St. Pierre in the show. He was compared to Anderson Silva. He basically lost the finals, lost 2 other fights, and was cut. He's had 3 straight wins in his career overall, and his last time he fought was in January, so worth noting. He went 2-1 in Bellator with a split decision loss against Marcin Held, who's doing very well there. He also lost to Tony Martin while fighting at lightweight. Remember, this bout's taking place at featherweight. Lost to Tony Martin. He's 5-2 since fighting in the UFC, and he did have a bit of a layoff. Took a year and a half off between his last 2 fights, and he is moving to featherweight after spending much of his career at lightweight, so some things to take a look at there. For Nam, he debuted with a split decision win over Kazuki Tokudomi. He's coming in on a 5-fight winning streak, but he's been off for a considerable amount of time, taking a roughly 14-month break. So guys taking some time off before fighting, we'll see how that affects him. He is also moving down to featherweight, so it's worth noting that both these guys making featherweight debuts. I'm pretty sure Nover hasn't fought at featherweight yet, fighting mostly at lightweight. The American will have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he actually has a Filipino background as well, so he'll have a little bit of, he should have the crowd in his favor coming to this matchup. The Korean bulldozer, 8 wins by knockout. He's 9-3 in fights that go to decision, which is pretty impressive. 1-1 in submissions versus Nover, who has 5 wins by submission, but his record after that is pretty subpar. 1-1 in fights that are ended by knockout, and 4-4 when fights go the distance. Nover is a BJJ black belt. His record suggests he lives and dies with a submission game. Basically, if he can submit his opponent, he's in pretty good shape. For Nam, he's an incredibly aggressive brawler. He likes to wade forward with big power, winging big shots, doesn't take a step back, and just keeps throwing. That's how he pretty much won his first fight. Against Fukudomi, he had him in all sorts of trouble. He couldn't finish him, even though he could have been stopped any number of times the way he had his opponent bouncing around the cage in there. Unfortunately for him, when he wasn't able to finish him, he badly gassed. He nearly lost the fight. He lost that second round, spent a lot of it on his back, and that's definitely not a positive. He has some offensive ground skills, but for the most part, he would be best to avoid going to the ground with Nover because that is his strongest aspect of his game. Nover, he has serviceable striking, maybe a little bit better than serviceable. Again, I haven't seen his recent fight. Unfortunately, I couldn't track it down. But again, his bread and butter is on the mat. And he should look to counter Nam's aggression, I would think, by changing levels for takedowns. When he comes forward, change levels, put him on the mat. That'll both give him a positional advantage, and also at the same time, it will keep Nam from being too aggressive and take away that forward push because he's afraid of being put on his back if Nover can accomplish that. If the fight does hit the mat, Nover will look for subs or sweeps off his back, obviously, and he's very strong from top position, and his back mount is very effective as well. The weight cut for both guys, it's very hard to predict. But when you look at the two fighters and how they fight with Nam, his attack is based on exploding and brawling and maintaining a high pace and being very aggressive, and that could drain him very quickly, especially if his body isn't able to stand up to that pace based on the weight cut. And, he really, as I say, he really struggled against Fukudomi in that last matchup when the fight hit the mat. And I think Nover's going to be able to exploit that. He needs to survive those early onslaught and not get blown out of the water right off the bat. Use that technical advantage on the mat, work his way to a dominant position. He has 3 wins by rear naked choke. I think if he gets his back, he can really break him down. I simply don't trust a guy who's a brawler. He could knock him out, but if he gasses, he'll be in all sorts of trouble. I'll stick with a guy who's got a more technical approach and who's been the more active, fighter of late. So my prediction is Philippe Nover to defeat the Korean bulldozer And again, the name is a lovely Chul Nam. I'm probably getting it wrong. Please correct me. Everyone's been correcting me of late. I'm going to take Nover by submission. I seem to be a little bit bitter. I keep making little comments and things pop up. I am a little bit pissed off. I'm on edge because I had a terrible performance last time out. But I love when people call me a cherry picker and bitch about my picks. And I got a fight to predict here. So check out the exit part of my show when I leave and talk before I leave. I will talk about that more. Let's get to this fight. This fight looks fantastic as the ace Hyun Lim, 13-4-1, takes on the number 15th ranked welterweight in the world, Magny, carrying a current record of 14-4-0. I'm excited for this matchup. And this is a big fight for both men, so they're probably excited as well. Winner gets a big step up in competition, starts looking at the upper echelon of the division. Magny comes in on a very impressive 6-fight winning streak. He has stopped 3 of his last 4 opponents. He started his UFC run with a 1-2 run. I think he's the only guy left. He was a semifinalist on his season of Tough, and he's the only guy still kicking around. For Lim, he's won 3 of his 4 UFC fights. All 3 of those wins coming by knockout. His lone loss came against Tarek Saffiedine, which was a step up in competition. And he, held his own in that matchup, but ultimately, he didn't win. It wasn't debatable. He got beat up, but he showed flashes that he can compete. Magny, unfortunately, has fought twice since Lim's last bout. And keep in mind, Lim's only been out of action for 8 months. That just shows you how active Magny has been in his recent runs. Not only is he winning a lot, he's fighting a lot. Both men are exceptionally tall for the division at 6'3". Magny does have a 3-inch reach advantage. Both, for the most part, are striking-based fighters. Lim has significant power, and that's his bread and butter. Magny, a more volume-based striker. Lim, 10 of his 13 wins have come by knockout. Unfortunately, he's 3-4 in fights where he doesn't score the KO, so if he can't stop his opponent, he's in tough for the most part. He's only gone beyond the second round twice, and he's 0-1-1, so that tells you how effective he is at stopping his opponents. Very aggressive. He leads with a very stiff jab, hard left hook, will work in an uppercut, decent array of kicks, and brutal knee strikes. Watch for those knee strikes. He used them to put down both Pascal Kraus and Marcel Guimaraes, 2 guys that I picked him to beat. I think both of them were upsets. At least the win over Pascal Kraus was an upset. On the negative side, he gets too aggressive. He starts to telegraph his strikes, especially as he slows down, and he will slow down if he doesn't stop his opponent early. He doesn't use his reach well. He tends to let his opponents get inside, and he gets hit a lot, and that's concerning. His output, 5.6 strikes per minute. That's very impressive. Those have been shorter fights where it's easier to carry that. He can't, and I don't think he can carry that pace for a longer matchup. 4.81 strikes absorbed per minute. That's a lot to be giving up, especially we saw in that Tarek Saffiedine matchup. In that matchup, for the most part, he was picked apart, especially as he got tired. For Magny, only 4 wins by knockout, with 2 of those knockouts have come in his last 4 fights. The power and his ability to knock guys out seems to be developing, and really he's molding it into his game, and it's quite nice to see as he's really advancing into a solid fighter. He has a nice variety of strikes coming to this matchup. He uses he uses his reach much more effectively. 3.7 strikes landed per minute versus only 1.51 strikes absorbed. He's very difficult to hit. Not impossible, but certainly difficult. It'll be interesting to see how he deals with a fighter of similar length, but I think it favors him nonetheless because Lim doesn't use that length very well. He tends to get weighed in, and I think Magny can capitalize on that. The Korean is incredibly dangerous early on, but I think Magny's ability to limit his opponent's connections and defend will wear him out. Additionally, Magny has also started to use his wrestling. 2.87 takedowns at 52% completion rate. Over his last 6 wins, he's landed 15 takedowns. I expect to see him shooting for takedowns at points here. But again, watch out for those knees because if Lim looks to land a knee, he's going to hurt you. And Lim, 83% takedown defense. He has been taken on a couple of times, but it's not. Guys haven't really focused on taking him down that much. I think Magny will do a good job there. Lim doesn't really have an offensive grappling game. He can if he wants to. He'll have good ground and pound on top because he can generate a lot of power, but it's not something he's going to go out and look for takedowns. Again, Lim is dangerous early. He showed he had a ton of heart against Tarek Saffiedine late, but he was not having heart and winning a fight are not the same thing, unfortunately. Magny needs to remain technical, limit his opponent's damage, force him to come forward. He forced him to expend a lot of energy. I think he'll pull away from Lim as he slows down and starts to telegraph his strikes. Magny will pick him apart. And my prediction is Magny to defeat Hyun Lim. I'll take Magny by decision. Our 4th fight in the main card, I think the Magny-Lim fight should have been up above this one, but I think this is a respect for this first competitor I'm going to talk about. The Filipino wrecking machine, Mark Munoz, coming with a record of 13-6-0, taking on the big, slow Luke Barnatt, currently holding a record of 8 wins and 2 losses. And this appears to be the retirement fight for Mark Munoz. He said win, lose, or draw, this appears to be it. He is fighting as a de facto home. He's a Filipino-American, so he should be the fan favorite here. And overall, though, he's trying to distance himself from MMA. He sold his gym. He wants to focus more on his family, which you cannot blame a man for that. And he also wants to get back into coaching and wrestling, strictly wrestling, so you wonder what kind of preparation he'll have coming into this matchup. But, no one wants to go out, with a losing effort. It would be a storybook ending for him to go to the Philippines and pick up a massive win. But, does he have it in him? For Barnatt, he comes into this matchup having lost back-to-back fights, both by split decision. The first 2 losses of his career, and he knows he can rebound and get his name right back on the map, though he picks up a win over a guy like Munoz. That's kind of a big step back for Munoz, unfortunately, in competition when you look at the guys he's fought of late. Divisional champion Chris Weidman, pre-championship. Former light heavyweight champion Lito Machida, Gegard Mousasi, who's also fighting on this card, and Ron Carneiro, he's coming off kind of a telling loss, showing Munoz is certainly slipping, as Carneiro is a, for the most sort of welterweight. Physically, Barnatt 6 inches taller. He'll have a 6-inch reach advantage, and he's 10 years younger, and those numbers are significant. For the most part, this is a wrestler versus a striker. They have, they're capable in other areas, but that's where their bread and butter is. Munoz, an NCAA Division I wrestler. Always, though, I've had questions about how well his wrestling is translated to MMA, and you look at his numbers and you'll see why I have questions. 2.46 takedowns at a 24% completion rate. He has landed 13 takedowns in his last 3 wins, but he has 0 takedowns in his last 4 losses. A lot of that has to do with because he's been dominating those matchups. They didn't last very long, but you see how important his wrestling is to his success. Heavy ground and pound, those donkey hammer fists. We saw him stop Chris Lipeng with those. He brutalized Tim Boach on the mat, and if he can get Barnatt down, he will utilize that attack. Unfortunately, the Brit, 82% takedown defense. Sean Strickland 1 for 3 in takedowns. Narvaez went 0 for 2, but Munoz is probably the best wrestler he will have faced in his young career. On the feet, Barnatt 4.86 strikes landed per minute. Pretty darn impressive. A .06 striking exchange rate, though he gets hit a lot, and he hits his opponent a lot. But I still think he has the advantage on the feet against Munoz. He showed he has power when he dropped Andrew Craig and he put Matt Nielsen away. He eventually submitted Craig in that matchup. He should have the advantage on the feet. Munoz has power, but he's not the greatest technical striker, and he's certainly losing a step or two. Barnatt needs to focus on being more active. I felt in a couple of his fights, especially against Narvaez, he was being too tentative. He needed to push the pace and really get in there and slug it out. He seems a little bit hesitant at times. It's similar in his other matchup against... the name is eluding me at the moment. I said it already once. Nonetheless, for the most part, Munoz's chin appears to be going. He's taking some serious damage over his career, and that's probably part of the reason he's saying enough is enough. We need to get out. The age gap is massive, 10 years, and that's a red flag. Yeah, it's a massive size advantage as well for Barnatt, and I think he has the ability to exploit his chin. So my prediction is Luke Barnatt to defeat Mark Munoz. I'll take Barnatt by TKO. Nonetheless, thank you very much, Mark Munoz, for everything you've done in your career. Well appreciated, and enjoy retirement if you do continue down that path. It's kind of funny there. I talked to Mark Munoz like he's listening to my show, but probably no one's listening to my show, and if you are, thank you very much. Nonetheless, if he is listening, he's probably damn excited because I just predicted him to lose, so he knows most likely he's going to win the way I'm going of late. Who am I kidding? I went 9-3 the fight card before, so it's all in the wash. Oh, moving on. Co-main event, and this should be a damn good fight, even though the odds say it's pretty lopsided. The number 7th ranked middleweight on the planet, Gegard Mousasi, former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion, 36-5-2, battling the number 12th ranked middleweight on the planet, Costas Philippou, with a current record of 13-4-0, and he has a no contest on his record as well. Now, this is for the most part as a striker versus striker. You have Mousasi's kickboxing and Costas' primarily a boxing-based fighter. Mousasi is 6 years younger. He has a 3-inch height advantage. He has a 3-inch reach advantage. The experience also favors Mousasi. 43 fights, even though he is this exceptionally younger man, to just 18 for Costa. Also, recent activity, Costa's been on the shelf for just over a year, while Mousasi's fought 3 times since Philippou's last performance. So all of the X factors, at least there, appear to be favoring the former Strikeforce champion. Both guys have knockout power. Mousasi, though, exceptionally more impressive numbers. 19 wins by knockout, and he has an exceptional chin. He's never been stopped. Costa Philippou, 7 of his 13 wins have come by knockout. He's gone 5 fights since his last 2 knockouts, knocking out Jared Hammond and then taking out Lorenz Larkin at the other end of the knockout Oreo, if we'll call it that, I guess. He was stopped by a body kick from Luke Rockhold in his only TKO defeat. Statistically, Mousasi lands about 1 more strike per minute and gets hit about 1.5 times less per minute. So both those numbers favor Gegard in that matchup as well. For Costa, he needs to fight this fight at boxing range. Get in close and land and keep those kicks out of the game. But that's going to be tough because Mousasi has a length advantage, and I said the kicking game is going to keep him on the outside. We saw how effective Luke Rockhold was at using it, and that's something I think Mousasi could exploit it as well. But the big thing with Costa is even when he closes in, he's still in the danger zone because Mousasi has exceptionally good striking with his hands, very good power. He's still very hard to hit in close. And he actually outlanded Lito Machida in that fight that he lost to. And also, I do like the fact that he can counter-strike, slip some shots from Costa, and counter in that position. Also, consider this, Gegard has the ability to use a ground-based attack if he wants to change things up. He has 12 wins by submission. He's a judo black belt. Not a lot of takedowns in his UFC run. His last real heavy performance was against OSP back in Strikeforce while fighting a light heavyweight. And Costas is a BJJ purple belt. He's shown very good takedown defense at times, but he's also shown vulnerabilities. He was taken down 5 times by Francis Carmont, a couple of times against Tim Boach, and he was losing that Boach fight until a couple of misfortunate undetected fouls kind of went against him in that matchup and allowed Costa to open the door to eventual victory. Mousasi, though, overall has seen more focus on striking. He does have the option to change gears, but I think he'll look for a striking-based assault in this fight. The biggest concern for me is that Mousasi at times can be a little bit too conservative, try to counter too much, let his opponent outwork him, and that's something you don't want to do against Costa Philippou, who could really push the pace on you and put the big numbers up. I think Costa, if that is the case, Costa could steal a round or two with aggression, and it's very costly in a 3-round fight. Nonetheless, Mousasi is more diverse. He has that grappling background to fall back on. He's younger. He's larger. And I like his chin. Even though Costa's never been knocked out based on his chin, it's been his body that cost him. Costa, there you go. Nonetheless, my prediction is Gegard Mousasi to defeat Costa Philippou. I'll take Mousasi by knockout. Yes, I'm picking the favorite. I cherry-picked him, if you will. Next, off to the main event we go. We are in the UFC's featherweight division. It's a pretty fun matchup with some title implications for both guys, but in different divisions. We have the number 2 ranked featherweight fighter on the planet and former UFC lightweight champion in Frankie the Answer Edgar, currently with a record of 17-4-1, and he's taken on the California Kid, currently ranked number 3 in the bantamweight division, former WEC featherweight champion Urijah Faber with a record of 32 wins and 7 losses. Now, I closed my thing that has my write-up. There we go. This is kind of a special attraction bout because both guys are kind of stuck in some difficult positions, but it could affect their future title implications depending on the outcome. As I said, Faber's kind of stuck in title contention purgatory because his teammate is the champion, even though he said he would fight. It's probably a better scenario than other things, having Dominic Cruz the champion or Renan Barão, guys he has lost soundly to. I could see that fight happening down the road, but Faber has to wait his turn and eventually agree to fight his training partner and friend. For Edgar, he's in a holding pattern, waiting for the possible winner of Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor. He knows it could be a long wait, especially if McGregor wins the title, because a rematch will most likely take place. He also knows Chad Mendes is sniffing around looking for his third opportunity, and some have called for Mendes versus Edgar to take place with the winner of that getting a title shot, which could happen should Edgar thrash his team alpha male buddy in Urijah Faber and certainly line up kind of a revenge matchup, and I'd watch that fight because it would be hella good. I can't believe I just said hella good. Forget that. It would be an excellent matchup. Physically, Edgar has a 1-inch reach advantage. They're the same height. Edgar is facing a guy who fights at bantamweight and he can't even gain a physical size advantage. He could be the larger man physically. Faber's not a big man to start with, but nonetheless, I just find lengthwise, at least it's, Edgar's not huge. He could easily fight at bantamweight if he wanted to, and he said that himself. Again, a couple big questions with Faber returning to featherweight. Will he have a speed advantage? How will that impact him? He is a little bit older than the last time he fought there. He's returning to the division that he dominated in the WEC. It's his first time fighting it at 145 pounds since he lost at WEC 48 to Jose Aldo, which was back in early 2010. Back in 2006, he captured the WEC title, defended it 5 times, held it until late 2008, so damn impressive. Another thing you look at here is Faber has not lost a non-title fight since 2005 when he fought Tyson Griffin in a regional promotion. He is 12-0 in bouts, not including a title as a champion or challenger since... wait, that's not correct. He's 12-0 over his last little bit since his losing the title. And in title fights, he's 0-5. So since he lost the title, he's 12-0 in non-title fights, and since he lost the title to Brown, he's 0-5 in fights that were for the title. That probably made no sense to you. It made sense to me. Deal with it. We're moving on. Edgar has lost 3 straight title fights overall. Dropped his belt to Benson Henderson, lost the rematch in controversial fashion, and then lost to Jose Aldo at 145 pounds, but he fared fairly well, and he wants another crack. Not shockingly. He has won 3 straight overall, coming off an impressive performance versus Cub Swanson, where he finished him in the 5th round. He's, he's Frankie Edgar. We know what to expect. Both guys, former NCAA Division I wrestlers. Edgar, 2.71 takedowns per fight, about 1 more per fight than Urijah Faber. Both guys have mid-30% completion rates, which is what you would not expect from guys with strong wrestling backgrounds, but it shows how heavy they rely on their striking at times. Both guys have solid takedown defense, and the big part of the thing is they are able to dictate where fights take place. But here's some numbers for you. Edgar has not lost a takedown battle since his fight against Matt Veach in 2009. No one knew who Frankie Edgar was back when he fought Matt Veach in 2009. Since that run, he has landed 30 takedowns to his opponent's 6. And since going featherweight in 4 fights, he has landed 14 takedowns and never been taken down once. So that's pretty impressive. Faber, similar stats, 14-2. 14 takedowns offensively, 2 takedowns defensively since over his last 6 fights. We did see him get taken down, though, 4 times by Dominic Cruz on 13 attempts, so it is possible at bantamweight for him to be put on his back. Of the two, I see Edgar having the ability to score takedowns and have some success with his wrestling. He should be able to defend them, and at the very least, their grappling should cancel out, which forces them to rely on their striking. I think Edgar overall is the more consistent and fluid striker versus Faber, who's a little bit more unorthodox and relies on his speed. And the question is, will he have the speed advantage here? But it won't be huge. Edgar lands about 1 strike more per minute, gives up a little bit less, so the numbers favor him statistically. And I really like the use of his lateral movement and overall footwork to diffuse Faber's explosive attack, because he likes to really, be a little bit stagnant and then bounce in and attack and then get back out, where I think Edgar will just keep circling and moving and really give him trouble. I think he'll outwork Faber in a similar fashion to what Dominic Cruz did. I think he'll land some takedowns. He'll be strong defensively versus everything Faber throws at him, both with the striking and with his wrestling attack. Frankie does tend to get hurt in fights, does tend to bleed a little bit, which helps his opponent gain some points. I thought he looked fantastic against Cub Swanson. I don't think we'll see a dominant performance like that because Urijah Faber is a whole other animal. And keep in mind the Faber title, as I like to call it, is on the line here. He hasn't lost a fight, as I mentioned, in forever with the title on the line. I think Frankie Edgar ends that, and my prediction is another favorite. Oh no, Frankie Edgar to defeat Urijah Faber in an entertaining bout, but I'll take Frankie Edgar by decision. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 66. Take them for what you will. The bet packs will be there. If you don't want to buy them, don't buy them. I will be betting on these fights and trying to win money, and so will you. And if you don't need my insight, I won't call it expertise at this point in time. If you don't need my insight or lack thereof to win money, good for you, and maybe I should buy your bet pack. Nonetheless, I the one with the site. So if you want to buy mine, please do, and if you don't, that's great too. As far as being called a cherry picker, that pisses me off a little bit, and I got really close to the mic when I said that, and I'm pointing at the people who call me a cherry picker, because I am not the definition of a cherry picker. A cherry picker would be someone who comes along and picks, of the 12 fights in the card, picks 6 fights, picks 6 easy favorites. Says these are 6 guys I think I'm going to win. Oh, I went 6-0. I pick every single fight. I have had the odd fight where I just said I don't have enough time to pick 12 fights. There's a couple debuting guys with, I think some of them were on the Tough China event where I passed on a couple of matchups. I'm going to try and predict all of the preliminary fights for this card. But I'm not a cherry picker. I pick every single fight, no matter how difficult it is, the limited amount of information it is on certain fighters. And yes, I get a ton wrong. I've lost over 600 fights in my prediction career, and I've won a couple, I can't even remember, over 1,000. I can't remember, I haven't even plugged the recent bullshit record I had in yet. Nonetheless, yes, you have to pick favorites, because favorites win fights. That's why they're favorites. And yes, it's not all about betting, unfortunately. Sometimes you just have to say, this guy is a better fighter, and he's going to punch his opponent more in the face than the other guy, or he's going to take him down, or he's going to submit, or put him to sleep, or knock him out. And that's what I think is going to happen. And yes, he doesn't pay very well, and that's the reason he doesn't pay very well, is because he is going to beat the shit out of that guy and take it to him. Gosh, I'm losing my technical edge here as far as talking about fights. But the fact of the matter is this. Sometimes I pick favorites and I'm right. Sometimes I pick favorites and I'm wrong. Sometimes I pick underdogs and I'm wrong. Sometimes I pick underdogs and I'm right. It just comes down to who I think is going to win. And if I don't think you're going to win, I'm not going to pick you no matter what the price tag is on you. And you can't win for losing. Wait, you can't win for trying. That's what I'm trying to say there. Because if I pick an underdog and he's wrong, then I'm reaching and looking for long shots and hopefully grabbing one. And if I pick if I pick a favorite and I'm right or wrong, people say, oh, easy, you're just picking easy, that's why your record's inflated. I'm holding up 2 middle fingers to you people, because I'm the one who at least has the balls to put my record out there and show you that I went 2-10 at the last show and talk about it, and you're the guys who come along and post and write emails and post and say to me, oh, you suck, you should be ashamed, you should be embarrassed. Yeah, I should be. I'm pissed. Fortunately, with this day and age in the UFC, I've got about 15 minutes before the next card comes along to break everything down for you. And again, remember, this is just a hobby. We're all having fun. If you're betting money that you can't afford to lose and are sitting here going, I'm going to, be pissed at this guy and send him a nasty email if I lose this money, you shouldn't be betting that type of money. Or you shouldn't be doing whatever it is you're doing that makes you so stressed out. Do you know what I did after the fight card was over? I went to sleep. 2-10. Who gives a shit? I'll wake up the next morning. I went and did my job. I kissed my kids. I said hello to my wife. potentially planning to kiss her later. And the fact of the matter is, at 2-10, I didn't care. Yet I still had emails come in, people bitching and complaining about how dare you do that. What, lose fights? How about the guys who got punched in the face and got submitted and knocked out and lost decisions? Those are the guys that, I feel for. Not me. I don't care. And nor do I care about your emails. If you want to write and be like, that really sucks. You got this wrong. But you made a good point here. That's fine. Or this is what I broke down. If you want to post your predictions on my video or on my website ahead of time, and then we'll compare numbers afterwards, and if you're better than me, good for you. And that's great. But I really just, you can tell it pisses me off just a little bit when people come after the fact and say, hey, look, this guy did this, and I knew he was going to do this. Okay, you did. Where's the evidence that you knew he was going to do this? Or you said this was going to happen, it didn't happen, but this happened, and I knew that was going to happen. But you, prediction guy, didn't. Well, good for you. Post your picks somewhere. Show me where you posted your picks. And if you're sparkling and awesome and 10-0, because anybody who did well, there could have been a few people who do well, but anybody who does well with that many underdogs is bullshitting you. Because if you put their record up against mine over whatever it is, 2,000 fights, and they're consistently picking that many underdogs on a regular basis, they are full of shit and their record is terrible. Let's end on that note. We're going for it. 0-12 this week. And if you're back next week, I will talk about the Reebok bullshit with the UFC. Thank you for tuning in, all 4 of you. And, yes, bye.